welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from Allagash Brewing Company out of Portland, Maine. We've had a few of their beers over the years, but it has been quite a while since I've reviewed one from them. I did get this one from Tavour, as I have gotten all of my Allagash Brewing beers. Today's beer in question is called Day's End. It's an Imperial Red Ale. This one clocks in at 9.5% ABV. It has been bourbon barrel aged, and they also have added lambrusco, grape must, angelica root, and orange peel. And the brewer says that this is kind of their beer take on the classic boulevardier drink, which is typically comprised of a mix of whiskey and sweet vermouth and Campari. So interesting kind of setup. I think with their ingredient additions that it might be able to kind of approximate it in beer form. So we're just going to jump in here and see what we think. In terms of label art on here, very nice clean design, very much maroon, I guess matching my shirt today. And yeah, looks nice. Nice clean label design. Gonna get this cracked. Been a while since I've had a red ale. And we're gonna use our nice all-purpose Sam Adams glass here today. Ooh, that's got a lovely color. It's actually got a nice hint of kind of pinkish orangey hue in there. I did not expect to see that shade. Typically a red ale, they're gonna call them a red ale, but they're really much more of kind of a dark caramelly color. This actually has noticeable hints of red in here, which further goes to kind of make a beer version of a boulevardier, since Campari is very, very red. But nonetheless, visually, yeah, that's stunning. It may not be picking it up on the camera, but I can tell you there is a definite reddish, pinkish, orangey hue to this one. So yeah, aptly named a red ale here. Formed a really nice head. Let's give it a sniff. Oh yeah. It smells very malty. I'm getting a lot of earthy accents off of this as well. Really smell the nice malt. I can smell a nice kick of hops on here too. I think that's where I'm getting a lot of this earthy kind of nose popping on me. Could be certainly from the angelica root as well. Orange peel I'm not really picking up. Bourbon barrel a little bit, but it's subtle. So in general, this smells much like a bigger kind of traditional red ale, though it's definitely got kind of an herbaceous, kind of herbal, earthy kind of aroma to it as well. So it smells really nice. It's got the classic, very malty. This one smells kind of crusty, kind of bready, kind of doughy on the nose from the malt bill, plus that underlying herbaceous earthiness. It smells really nice. It looks really nice. Head is holding true. Let's jump right in for sip number one. Oh yeah, that's a nice beer. That's a big beer. This puts me in mind of several different beers, all of which are very, very good. And not your typical flavor profile for a red, and in a very good way. Reds are fine. It's a fine style. This has just a lot more nuance to it, and it's got a lot more kind of flavor that packs into it that I think makes it taste a cut above your typical red ale. So before we even get into the flavor profile, let's talk body, let's talk weight. It's a 9.5% red. So yeah, it's got some presence. I would say the weight on this feels a proper, steady, medium heavy. That's roughly where it's falling in line. For pushing 10% ABV, that's kind of where I would expect it would be. In terms of the mouthfeel, you can definitely feel the resistance on this one. It is rather creamy when you agitate on the palate, which is quite typical for a red ale. So very, very nice texture and weight on here, exactly what I expected. In terms of the flavor profile, it's what really opened up there that kind of took me back compared to most red ales I've had, and in a good way. So the very first visceral reaction that I had when I swallowed was, this tastes like a really, really good Belgian beer. And in a very, very good way. Almost like a Belgian golden ale or strong ale. And it's really kind of these undercurrent notes that are coming out of the malt bill that they used and whatever yeast strain they used in this specific beer. It's got a lot more layers of complexity and nuance to it. The other thing that I gotta add, the bourbon barrel on here, yes, it comes through, but it was reasonably subtle on the nose. It's actually also reasonably subtle on the flavor profile. I believe they said they only aged it for a couple months, so it's kind of a finishing tool, but the bourbon barrel side is not supposed to be the star of the show. It's kind of a whole package beer of what special stuff they did to it. And I think that gamble paid dividends. If this had been kind of leave it 6 months to a year in a bourbon barrel, it would completely change the characteristic of this beer, and I like it just how they did it. You know me, I love a good, big, long barrel aging on a beer, but in this beer, what they were making it out to be, the balance is really, really nice, especially if this is kind of their beer interpretation of a boulevardier. So, really, really nice beer. There's a lot of nuance and other layers and flavors, and just like I was getting kind of crust and dough kind of notes on the nose, that comes through in the flavor profile as well. In terms of the kind of yeast notes I'm also getting in tandem, when I was mentioning about it kind of reminding me, putting me in mind of some Belgian beers, it's not one of those that has like a clovey note to the yeast strain at all. It's not. It's very much kind of a more clean classic red in that respect, but it comes through very nice with a lot of layers. Now, angelica root, that's not something I consume every day. I'm sure that it's playing a part in this beer, but I can't at least discern anything other than there's a slight herbal quality to it, just like I got on the nose. Easily could be coming from the angelica root. It also could be coming from the grape must. And then finally, talking about the flavors here, the orange peel was quite subtle on the nose, and I didn't get anything on first sip. So when I jump back in here, I'm going to really be paying attention and picking this apart. So we're going to do exactly that. Then we'll talk about the balance and the finish. But sip one, very good beer. Take two. Yeah, it's got that nice, just bourbon subtlety up front. It's there, but it's not an intensity. And you get this big complex burst out of the malt bill and the yeast strain that they used in here, and that's where it's really, really money for me. Yeah, this one definitely has a lot of dough, a lot of cracker, a lot of kind of crusty vibes to it, but there is a lot of the traditional kind of caramelly notes you would get in a typical red as well. But it definitely leads with a stronger kind of underpinning of this doughy, bready, crackery, as well as yeast flavor forward side that's coming out of this beer in particular. Orange peel is there. It's subtle. You kind of have to wait till the first pop of intensity of flavor dials back just a little bit, and then it comes out, but it is there. It kind of pops in on the finish. And in general, I would say with the balance on this beer is really, really nice. Everything they put in here, I think they used a very deft hand, and I think that it made a much more refined beer than it otherwise could have been if they went ham-fisted with their ratios or their time and duration. Very, very nice. It's got a lot of subtlety to it, a lot more than your average red ale. In terms of the finish on this, it is a little bit longer than your average red, but not ridiculously long. I'd say it's kind of high end of average. Maybe you would expect, oh, bourbon barrel aging is going to be super long. No, because they were subtle with everything they did in here. So this is one of those beers that has a much more delicate hand with the balancing, their ratios, and their time. It's not something that you get often, and I think that this beer is all the better for it. I love a big, bold, in-your-face beer, but there's a lot to be said about how masterfully a brewer has to work to get something that comes out like this, because it would be so easy to go overboard, but this is just a beautiful exercise in subtlety, and it is wonderful. Guys, I'm going to take my time to sip on this beer, come up with my scores. When we come back, we will get this one ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Allagash Brewing Company's Days In, an Imperial Red Ale that clocked in at 9.5%. This specific variant was bourbon barrel aged, and it had added lambrusco, grape must, angelica root, and orange peel. Allagash Brewing is based in Portland, Maine. So guys, this was a really, really nice beer. I figured that this would be a good one. This is one that I've been sitting on for a couple months and decided to pull it out today. But I truly did not expect this to be as nuanced and as subtle and to have had such a deft hand at the brewing process for what this brought to the table. I was absolutely blown away. This was one of those world-class beers. This was not your average red ale at all. And not that it deviated from the style. What I mean is what they did with it, how they produced it, what they added to it, and the way that they did it was so different than the norm and in the best way possible. This was one of those beers where you could almost argue that the philosophy is less is more. And I think it absolutely paid dividends. It made for a much, much, much more special beer. And I truly loved it. The bourbon barrel aging alone, that aspect of the beer could have easily gone overboard. And I love a big barrel aged beer. I absolutely do, as you ought to know by watching my channel. But the fact that they, yes, bourbon barrel aged this, but it was only for 2 months in select barrels. It added the subtlety, this nuance of aroma, this nuance of flavor without being the driving factor. They let the underlying beer speak for itself, and then they added in these other ingredients to the side, and just the balance on this was absolutely top tier, guys. There was so much layering, so much complexity, and so much subtlety that is very, very rare to find in a beer. I was truly blown away by what Allagash brought to the table. So, we're going to jump straight into the scores, guys. This was another beer that nearly swept it across the board. Only a solitary category that did not get a perfect score. We're going to jump straight to the category in question, and that was the finish. So yes, this was a higher ABV. It was an Imperial variant, 9.5%, and yes, it was barrel aged, but as we know, they were a lot more reserved with what they did to this beer with their add-ons, their additives, their added processes. It was a much more deft hand, and it made for just an absolutely incredible beer drinking experience. But the flip side of the coin is that the finish was not as long as you would expect for a 9.5% Imperial Red Ale that was also bourbon barrel aged. This is not to take anything away from the beer. It just is what it is. It was on the high end of average for the style. Had they gone heavier with the barrel, I am certain that the finish would have been way longer. But it was definitely on the high end of average for the scale. And it is what it is. I don't consider it a detraction, but the score is the score. And in this case, the finish did get a 6 out of 10. But that does leave a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 9 categories of aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, head and retention, appearance, balance, feeling/intangible, my subjective thoughts category, and also example of style. So the total score on Allagash Brewing Company's Days End is a 96 out of 100. Guys, this is another one of those beers that was so close to getting a perfect score. And frankly, a beer like this, the way that they built it, I mean, I would call this just about as perfect of an Imperial Red Ale as you could possibly get. It is what it is. I have to rank it how I experienced it, and the finish is what it is for the ABV range and what they did. But I think that the beer was so much better for all of the decisions they made across the board. The added ingredients, the length of time, how they put this together, what they put in it, their malt bill, the yeast strain, it all worked together. It was an extremely complex, extremely nuanced beer. This is one of the best red ales I have ever had, hands down. If you're a fan of red ales, I do highly recommend you see if you can find this. I did get mine from Tavour. I don't know if it's going to pop up again anytime soon. Maybe check Craft Shack, your local bottle shop, Total Wine. Well worth the effort. Absolutely world-class red ale here, guys. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications, hit that bell icon. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.